The boat is moving, but only just. A slow, gentle roll. The kind of movement that takes 4 or 5 seconds to complete in each direction. So gradual that the body receives it not as motion, but as something closer to breathing. The hull tilts a few degrees one way, pauses at the limit of its arc, and returns. The water in the bay is dark and nearly still. The anchor is holding in the sand 15 meters below, the chain curving down from the bow in a slow catenary, and the boat swings on it in the faint evening wind like a compass needle finding its bearing. This is the yacht at anchor. This is the most restful address on earth. If this kind of story is how you end your nights, please subscribe right now so you never miss one. Hit the like button. It means more than you know. And drop a comment telling us where in the world you are watching from and what time it is there. We love knowing who is with us. Now, let's go down to the water. The bay is sheltered from the open sea by a headland to the west and a long arm of rock to the north. Whatever the ocean is doing outside, and tonight it is doing very little, a low swell running from the southwest that the headland has reduced to the slow roll arriving under the hull, does not arrive here in full. The bay filters the sea. The bay takes the ocean's energy and gentles it, delivers it to the anchored boat, as a reminder that the water is alive rather than a demand that anything be done about it. Around the boat, or the water catches and returns the faint light available. The stars above the bay are bright enough on a moonless night to make the water surface faintly luminous, each small ripple carrying a point of reflected light that appears and disappears as the surface moves. The hull makes a sound against this water, a soft, irregular sound, the water pressing against the fiberglass and releasing, pressing and releasing, a rhythm with no fixed tempo, no repeat interval, no pattern the mind can anticipate, and therefore lock onto. This is the sound that people who have slept on boats describe as the best sleep they have ever had. The science behind this is real. At the gentle vestibular stimulation of a slowly rocking environment, the exact frequency and amplitude produced by a boat at anchor in calm water has been shown in sleep research to synchronize with the brain's own sleep rhythm oscillations, accelerating the transition into deep sleep and increasing the duration of the deepest sleep stages. The body in a gently rocking environment falls asleep faster, sleeps more deeply, and wakes more slowly than the same body in a stationary bed. The sailors who have known this for 10,000 years did not need the research to confirm what their bodies had always told them. The anchor holds, the boat swings, the water makes its sound against the hull. Tonight, we are spending the night aboard. We are going to learn what the boat is made of, and what the keel does, and how the wind moves through the sails, and what the cook makes in the galley in the small hours of a night watch, and what the stars look like from the cockpit at 3 in the morning on the 5th day of a passage with no land in sight in any direction. We are going to go out to sea, and then we are going to come back to this bay and drop the anchor and let the water carry the rest of the night. The boat is moving, but only just. It is exactly enough. A sailing yacht is one of the oldest technologies still in everyday use. Not in a museum, not in a reenactment. In daily use, on every ocean on Earth, by people who have chosen the wind as their engine and the sea as their road, using principles of hull design and sail aerodynamics and rigging geometry that trace their lineage back thousands of years to the first person who held a piece of cloth in the wind from a floating platform and felt the platform move in response. The hull is the beginning of everything. It is the vessel's relationship with the water, the shape that determines how the boat moves, how much it carries, how it behaves in different sea conditions, how fast it can go, and in what direction. The hulls of modern cruising yachts are displacement hulls. They move through the water by pushing it aside and letting it close behind them. The hull sitting in a hole in the water surface of its own creation, the weight of the boat supported by the buoyancy of the water it displaces. The boat does not skim over the surface. It is part of the surface, and sitting in it, moving through it, in a relationship with the water that is intimate and continuous and never fully resolved. The keel extends below the waterline, a heavy fin of lead or cast iron bolted to the bottom of the hull, ballasting the boat against the force of the wind in the sails. Without it, the wind would push the boat sideways and eventually over. With it, the boat can be pressed by the wind and heel to an angle and drive forward rather than sideways. The keel's weight and hydrodynamic resistance converting the lateral push of the wind into forward motion. We will spend much more time with the keel shortly. Above the waterline, the deck and the cockpit and the companionway hatch leading below. The mast, a single aluminium extrusion in most modern sailing yachts, rising from the deck to a height that can reach 20 meters or more in a larger vessel, is stayed by wires running from its upper sections to chain plates on the deck. The whole standing rigging working as a system of tension members that keeps the mast upright under the enormous compression. Loads that the wind in the sails produces. The sails themselves, the mainsail attached along its leading edge to the mast, and along its lower edge to the boom, the headsail or jib on a stay forward of the mast, are fabric wings shaped by their cut and their trim to generate the aerodynamic force that drives the boat. They are not simple surfaces. They are three-dimensional aerofoils, their shape maintained by a combination of the fabric's structural properties, the cut of the sailmaker's panels, and the tension applied to the various control lines that manage their trim. The categories of sailing yacht span an enormous range. At the small end, the day sailor, a 10 to 15 foot open boat, no cabin, sailed for the pleasure of an afternoon on the water and brought back to the beach at the end of it. At the large end, the blue water passage maker, a vessel of 40 to 60 feet, built for extended ocean crossings, carrying months of provisions and water and fuel, designed to be sailed by a couple or a small crew across the Atlantic or the Pacific without landfall for weeks. Between these extremes, the vast middle ground of cruising yachts, boats designed to go somewhere, to be lived aboard, to carry a life with them across the water. Every one of them, from the smallest dinghy to the largest offshore cruiser, is doing the same fundamental thing, using the wind to move across the water, a technology so old it predates writing. Still, the most peaceful way to travel that human beings have ever found. The hull of a sailing yacht at rest is in constant conversation with the water, not a demanding conversation, not the high-frequency, high-energy interaction of a boat pounding through a steep chop at speed, a gentle one, a quiet exchange of pressure and response, the water pressing against the hull's curved surface and the hull pressing back, each small wave arriving and being absorbed and deflected by the shape of the boat, the energy of each small disturbance converted into the slow roll and the soft sound that defines the character of a boat at anchor. The sound is the thing worth understanding first. At the hull of a fiberglass cruising yacht, the glass-reinforced plastic that most modern sailing boats are built from acts as a resonating surface when water presses against it. Fiberglass is stiff but not rigid, and it has a particular acoustic property. It transmits and slightly amplifies certain frequencies while attenuating others. When small waves lap against the hull below the waterline, the sound they produce is not muffled by the hull material. It is transmitted through it, modified by it, and delivered to the interior of the boat as a soft, complex, multi-frequency sound that fills the cabin the way music fills a room. Present everywhere, localized nowhere, more felt than heard. People who sleep aboard boats consistently describe this sound as one of the most effective natural sleep sounds they know. More effective, many say, than the recorded ocean sounds that white noise machines attempt to replicate. The reason is almost certainly that the sound aboard a real boat is not a recording of one static moment. It is continuously varying, each small wave different from the last, the interval between waves irregular, the frequency and amplitude shifting minute to minute as the wind changes and the boat's orientation to the incoming waves changes. The brain, which quickly habituates to a repeated, predictable sound, and can thereafter be kept awake by the anticipation of the next repetition, never habituates to the hull sound because the hull sound never repeats exactly. The sound from outside the hull is matched by a separate acoustic contribution from inside it. A fiberglass hull is hollow. The interior spaces of the bilge and the hull cavities below the cabin sole act as resonant chambers that amplify the low-frequency components of the water sound and send them up through the structure into the sleeping spaces. The low, irregular pulse of water against the hull arrives in the cabin, not just through the walls, but through the floor, through the very structure the sleeping person is lying on. Below the waterline, the shape of the hull is doing its quiet structural work. The displacement hull at rest is in equilibrium, the weight of the boat exactly balanced by the buoyancy of the water it displaces. The waterline sitting at precisely the level that this balance requires. When a wave passes under the hull, and the buoyancy on one side momentarily exceeds the other, or the hull tilts slightly toward the less buoyant side, and the wave passes through, and the hull returns to equilibrium. This is the roll. Its period, the time it takes to complete one cycle, is determined by the hull's beam, its ballast ratio, and the distribution of weight aboard. A well-designed cruising yacht has a roll period in the range of 3 to 5 seconds in calm water, exactly the range that vestibular research identifies as most conducive to the sleep-initiating effect of rhythmic motion. The hull shape is not accidental. It has been refined over centuries of practical experience in building vessels that behave well in the conditions where they operate. The flared bow that deflects spray, the rounded bilges that ease the rolling motion, or the fine entry at the waterline that reduces resistance. Each one a solution to a specific hydrodynamic problem, accumulated in the tradition of boat building and passed forward through generations of designers. The water presses against the hull. The hull presses back. The boat breathes its slow roll, and the sound of it fills the cabin in the dark. Below the waterline, invisible to anyone watching from the shore or from another boat, the keel hangs. It is heavy, A typical lead keel on a 35-foot cruising yacht weighs between 1,500 and 3,000 kilograms. A mass of dense, dull metal cast into a hydrodynamic fin shape, bolted to the bottom of the hull with a row of stainless steel bolts, whose integrity is one of the most critical structural facts about the entire vessel. The keel bolt survey is the part of any second-hand yacht purchase that the surveyor pays closest attention to. The keel is where the ballast lives, and the ballast is what keeps the boat upright. And if the keel separates from the hull, the boat will capsize and will not come back. But under normal conditions, under the conditions that a well-maintained yacht in good sea states experiences for the great majority of its life, the keel is simply there, doing its work without announcement, invisible below the surface. The work it does is the work of stability. When the wind fills the sails and presses against them, it produces a heeling moment, a force that tries to push the top of the mast away from the wind and rotate the hull around its waterline. Without the keel, this force would simply roll the boat over. With the keel, the heavy lead ballast below the waterline creates a righting moment that opposes the heeling moment. The further the boat heels, the longer the lever arm between the center of buoyancy and the center of gravity, the stronger the righting force that tends to bring the boat back upright. This is the reason a sailing yacht can be pressed hard by the wind, heeled 15, 20, 25 degrees from the vertical, and will not capsize. The keel is constantly providing a restoring force proportional to the angle of heel. The boat finds an equilibrium angle, the point where the heeling moment from the wind and the righting moment from the keel exactly balance, and sails there, at that angle, using the wind's force to drive forward rather than being overwhelmed by it. The keel also provides resistance to leeway, the tendency of the wind pressing against the sails to push the whole boat sideways through the water rather than forward. The keel's flat faces, pressing against the water as the boat is pushed sideways, generate a hydrodynamic lift force, the same mechanism as a wing, operating horizontally rather than vertically, that resists the sideways motion and redirects it into forward drive. A sailing yacht converts the wind's lateral push into forward motion, partly through the sail's aerodynamics and partly through the keel's hydrodynamics. The two surfaces, one in the air, one in the water, working together to extract forward drive from a force that is mostly trying to push the boat sideways. The lead in the keel has been there since the boat was built. It has crossed oceans and harboured in dozens of bays and survived the occasional grounding and the passage of decades, slowly acquiring the thin layer of anti-fouling paint applied each year to prevent the barnacles and weed that would otherwise colonize its surface. It is the oldest and heaviest and most permanent thing on the boat. It does not move, it does not wear out, it does not require maintenance beyond the coat of paint. It simply hangs there, in the dark water below the hull, doing the one thing it was cast to do, keeping the boat upright, keeping the mast pointed at the sky, year after year, passage after passage, anchorage after anchorage, the quiet, invisible foundation of everything the boat can do. A sail working well is nearly silent. This surprises people who have not sailed, who imagine a sail to be a noisy thing, a sheet of fabric thrashing in the wind, the snap and pop of a flag in a stiff breeze. A flag flogs because it is not attached at its trailing edge, and the air passing it can separate into turbulent eddies on both sides simultaneously, causing the fabric to oscillate rapidly between them. A sail working as it should is attached at all its edges except the leech, the trailing edge, and its shape is maintained by the tension in the sheets and halyards, so that the air flows smoothly over both surfaces rather than separating into turbulence. A sail in this condition barely makes a sound. You feel the boat moving, you feel the slight heel, you feel the pressure in the tiller or the wheel as the keel and rudder work against the water, and the sail above you is as quiet as a wing. The sail is a wing. This is not a metaphor. The aerodynamic mechanism by which a sail generates force is identical in its principles to the mechanism by which an aircraft wing generates lift. The same pressure differential, the same Bernoulli physics, the same dependence on the angle of attack and the aerofoil shape. The sail is a vertical wing, and the force it generates is largely horizontal, driving the boat through the water, but the mechanism is the same. When the wind fills the sail from behind, the point of sail called running, the wind coming from directly behind the boat, the sail acts less like a wing and more like a parachute, catching the wind and being pushed by it directly. This is the simplest and most intuitive relationship between wind and sail. It is also, in most conditions, not the fastest. Modern sailing yachts are typically faster sailing across the wind, reaching than running directly before it, because the reaching sail generates aerodynamic lift rather than simply catching the wind, and lift can be more efficient than drag in the right conditions. The sounds of the boat under sail are a vocabulary. An experienced sailor reads the boat by ear as much as by eye. The slight hum of the forestay as the wind loads the rig, the groan of a heavily loaded sheet in its clutch, the tick of a winch being tightened, the soft rush of water along the topsides as the boat accelerates through a puff of wind, the luff of the headsail, the gentle flapping of its leading edge when the boat is sailed too close to the wind, is a signal to bear away slightly, to fill the sail again. And the shiver of the mainsail leech in an apparent windshift is a signal to ease the sheet or trim it, depending on which way the wind has moved. The sailor is in continuous conversation with the boat through these sounds. Not a demanding conversation. Most of the time, the boat is balanced and the sounds are quiet, and nothing requires adjustment. But an attentive one. The ear stays open even when everything is right, because it is the first instrument to register when something changes. At night, when the eye is less useful, the ear becomes the primary instrument. Experienced night sailors describe the particular alertness of sailing in the dark, the way the sounds of the boat come forward in consciousness when the visual information that normally competes with them is reduced. The bow wave, the sheet tension, and the sound of the wind in the rigging shifting in frequency as the apparent wind angle changes. All of it readable, all of it meaningful, all of it arriving through the same remarkable organ that is also, right now, receiving this story. The sail is quiet, the boat is moving, the water is passing along the hull with a low, steady sound, and somewhere in the rigging, very faintly, the wind is making its own music. The galley of a cruising yacht is approximately the size of a large wardrobe. It occupies one side of the main saloon, typically just inside the companionway hatch, where the cook can see the cockpit and the sky, and be close enough to the deck to move outside quickly if conditions change. The surfaces are compact and precisely arranged. the stove gimbaled on fore and aft pivots so that it swings level when the boat heels, or the pot holders on the burners keeping the pans in place when the boat moves. The fiddle rails along the edges of the countertops, preventing anything from sliding off when a wave lifts the bow. Everything in the yacht galley is where it is because it cannot be anywhere else. The storage is three-dimensional, behind every panel, beneath every sole board, inside every locker, because a cruising yacht carries months of provisions in a space that a studio apartment kitchen would find inadequate. The tins are wedged in so they do not rattle at sea. The bottles are in net bags. The eggs, if there are eggs, are turned daily to keep the yolk suspended and extend their life without refrigeration. The fresh food comes first, and the imperishables come after, and the cook knows precisely what is where, because at sea, in the dark. With the boat moving, reaching for the wrong thing is a problem. The stove runs on propane or kerosene, stored in a vented locker outside the main accommodation to prevent gas accumulation below. The oven, if there is one, is small enough that a standard loaf of bread must be halved to fit. The refrigerator, if the yacht has one, is a top-loading insulated box whose compressor runs off the boat's batteries, which are charged by the engine or by solar panels on the stern arch. Managing the power budget, keeping the refrigerator running without draining the batteries faster than they can be charged, is one of the ongoing calculations of life aboard. And yet, from this small, precisely constrained space, in conditions that would defeat most domestic cooks, the boat heeled 15 degrees, the sea moving under the hull, so the cook standing in a harness clipped to a jackstay, the stove swinging beneath the pot, comes food that sailors consistently describe as among the most satisfying they have ever eaten. The psychology of this is real. Food made at sea, in a rolling galley, after hours on watch in the cold and the dark, arriving in a bowl in the hands of someone who has been waiting for it, tastes different from food made in a house. It tastes like exactly what it is: warmth and nourishment delivered at the moment the body most needs them, in conditions where their production required genuine effort. The simple soups and stews and pasta dishes that the galley reliably produces taste after 4 hours on the midnight watch in 15 knots of wind, like the best meals ever made. There is also the smell. A yacht at sea has a particular smell below decks: salt air and slightly damp wood and the residual warmth of the last meal. And the addition of something hot cooking on the gimbal stove changes the whole character of the space. The smell of a hot meal arriving in the boat's interior when you come off watch and down the companionway is one of the specific, unrepeatable pleasures of passage making, remembered by people who have done it as one of the clearest sense memories of the whole experience. The cook is standing at the stove now, one hand on the pot handle, the other braced against the fiddle rail. The boat heels slightly in a puff. The stove swings level. The soup stays in the pot. And in 20 minutes, someone coming off watch in the cold will climb down the companionway and hold a warm bowl in both hands and feel, completely and without qualification, taken care of. On a passage of any length, the crew divides the night, not arbitrarily. The watch system that offshore sailors use has been refined over centuries of practical experience with the problem of sailing a boat continuously without exhausting the people aboard. One watch sleeps while the other sails. They rotate. The boat keeps moving. The ocean does not pause for sleep, and so the crew does not either. not in the sense of everyone sleeping at once. Instead, sleep is taken in portions, distributed through the 24 hours, each watch below becoming precious in the way that things become precious when they are finite and earned. The most common arrangement on a short-handed cruising yacht, two people sailing together. The most common crewing situation in offshore sailing is the 3-hour watch. One person sails from 9 to midnight. The other sails midnight to 3. The first returns for 3 to 6. The second for 6 to 9. And so the rotation continues. Each person sleeping in 3-hour segments, the boat always sailed, the horizon always watched. 3 hours of sleep at a time is not much by the standards of a life ashore. But at sea, it becomes sufficient in a way that surprises most first-time offshore sailors. The quality of the sleep is different. The boat's motion, the sound of the water, the particular tiredness that comes from hours in the fresh air, and the physical engagement of sailing combine to produce a depth of sleep that most people do not access in ordinary life. And the 3 hours below are not a compromise version of the 7 hours at home. They are a different, more complete rest. The body using every minute of the available time because it knows that the time is limited and the next watch will come regardless. The watch above is its own world, 4 hours or 3 of the boat and the sea and the sky, with nothing else requiring attention. No phone, no list of tasks, no person needing anything from you. The boat needs attention, a check of the compass, a scan of the horizon, an eye on the sail trim and the weather, a hand on the helm or a monitoring of the autopilot. But this attention is of a specific, clean kind, present, physical, continuous, and completely sufficient. There is no sense in which a watch on a sailing yacht at night could be called boring. The sea is never boring, but it is calm. The demands are real and manageable, and they are all that exist for the duration of the watch. The watch change is its own small ritual. The off-watch sailor is woken 10 minutes before the hour, enough time to become fully conscious, to pull on warm clothing, to make a cup of something hot if the galley allows it. The incoming watch comes on deck and receives the handover. Current position, heading and speed, wind angle and strength, any traffic on AIS, the state of the sky ahead, and to weather, any changes in the boat's behavior since the last watch. This is a brief exchange, a few sentences, the important information transferred in the way that the important information is transferred between any two professionals handing over a responsibility. And then the outgoing watch goes below, and the incoming watch settles into the cockpit, and the boat continues. The person going below in the dark, tired and cold, pulling off their foul weather gear in the red light of the navigation area, climbing into the sea berth that is still warm from the previous occupant, hearing the sounds of the boat and the water and the wind above them as they pull the lee cloth into place. This person is asleep within minutes, often within seconds. The sea asks a great deal of the people who sail on it, but in return it gives this, the deepest sleep. Every time, the anchor goes down with a sound that is one of the most satisfying sounds in sailing, and the windlass releases the chain, and the links run out over the bow roller with a heavy cascading rattle. The chain piling on the seabed as the boat drifts back in the breeze, the scope paying out, the depth sounder confirming the depth, the skipper watching the angle of the chain from the bow to estimate when enough has been deployed. Then the windlass brake goes on. The boat takes up on the chain. The chain tightens, then slackens, then tightens again as the boat settles into the wind. And somewhere below, in the sand or the mud or the weed of the seabed, the anchor digs in. The anchor is a simple device, a metal structure designed so that when it is dragged along the seabed by the horizontal pull of the anchor chain, it resists the dragging by digging in, by rotating into a position where the flukes or the blade or the scoop shape of the anchor catches in the seabed material and loads up rather than sliding. The holding power of a well-set anchor comes not from the weight of the anchor itself, but from the resistance of the seabed material to the anchor's digging. A light anchor in good sand, well set, with adequate scope, holds a heavy yacht in strong conditions. A heavy anchor dragged along a rocky seabed without setting holds nothing. The scope, the ratio of the length of anchor chain deployed to the depth of the water, is the critical variable. A short scope means the chain rises steeply from the seabed to the bow, and the component of the anchor's pull that is horizontal rather than vertical is reduced, in meaning the anchor is being partly lifted rather than purely pulled along, reducing its tendency to dig in. Adequate scope, a ratio of at least 3:1 between chain length and depth, and preferably 5 or 7:1 in strong conditions, ensures the pull on the anchor is nearly horizontal, maximizing the digging in force. A well-set anchor in good holding ground is extraordinarily reliable. The yacht can swing on it through 360 degrees as the wind shifts through the night, the chain describing a circle on the seabed as the boat swings, the anchor remaining in its set position regardless of the direction the boat is pulling from. The anchor does not know which direction the boat is pulling. It only knows that the pull is horizontal and that its job is to resist it, and the test of the set is a brief burst of reverse engine power after anchoring, enough thrust to load the anchor with a force comparable to what a strong wind would generate, confirming that the anchor is well dug in before the engine is shut down and the crew goes below. If the anchor drags under this test, better to know now than at 3 in the morning in a freshening wind. But when the test is passed and the engine is off and the boat is swinging quietly to its anchor in a sheltered bay, there is a specific quality of peace that comes from knowing the boat is held, not tied to a dock where the lines can chafe and the fendering can fail, and the boat is in a fixed position relative to a structure it is dependent on, held by the seabed itself through a length of chain, with the ability to swing freely and accommodate whatever the wind does through the night, in ground that has been assessed and found good. The chain hangs from the bow, the seabed holds it, the boat rests, and below, in the sea berths, the sleeping bodies move with the same slow swing as the hull above them, held gently, completely, by the depth and the ground and the length of chain between them. There is no safer feeling on the water. There never has been. Before there were weather forecasts, sailors read the sky, not as folklore or superstition, though folklore encoded real observational knowledge, but as direct empirical meteorology accumulated over centuries of ocean experience and passed forward through the sailing tradition as practical wisdom. The red sky at night and the red sky in the morning, the mackerel sky and the mare's tails, the ring around the moon, the backing wind and the veering wind, and the specific way the barometric pressure moves when a frontal system is approaching, versus when the high is building. All of it read from the direct observation of the sky and the sea and the instruments aboard, without any information source beyond what was visible and measurable from the deck. Modern sailors have weather files downloaded via satellite, routing software that models the likely wind and sea conditions along any route, reliable forecasts to 3 and 5 and 7 days out. And yet, the tradition of sky reading persists among experienced offshore sailors, not as affectation, but because the sky above the boat is always more current than any forecast, because the local conditions always have nuances that the regional model misses, and because the skill of reading weather from direct observation is a redundancy, a capability that remains available if the satellite link fails or the routing software disagrees with what the eye can see. The clouds are the most readable part of the sky. Cirrus, the high, thin, wispy streaks of ice crystals at 30,000 feet and above, form in the outflow of developing low-pressure systems and often precede the arrival of weather by 24 to 48 hours. Mackerel sky, cirrocumulus, the rippled pattern that looks like the scales of a fish, indicates an unstable atmosphere at altitude and often precedes change. And the thickening sequence of cirrus to altostratus to nimbostratus, the grey-white veil that progressively obscures the sun as a frontal system approaches, tells the sailor that rain and wind are coming and gives them time to shorten sail and prepare. The wind on the water tells its own story. In the northern hemisphere, a wind that backs, shifts counterclockwise as a front approaches, indicates the passage of a warm front and warns of the cold front to follow. A wind that veers, shifts clockwise after the front passes signals that the system is moving through and conditions will improve. The barometer confirms or qualifies what the sky suggests. A rapid fall in pressure accelerating over hours indicates an intensifying system. A slow, steady fall indicates a more gradual approach. The sea state carries information too. A swell from a direction inconsistent with the local wind indicates distant weather-driving waves that have propagated to the boat's position. A confused, crossed swell indicates competing weather systems. The color of the water changes when a cold front is nearby. The surface tension different in colder water. The ripple pattern different. The sailor in the cockpit at dawn is watching all of this simultaneously. An integrations of multiple streams of imprecise, probabilistic information that the experienced eye assembles into a picture of what is likely coming and when. Not certainty. Weather never offers certainty, but informed probability, the kind that allows sensible decisions to be made about sail area and course, and whether to make for that anchorage before noon or push on through the afternoon. And the sky has been readable in these ways for as long as the atmosphere has existed. The sailors who learned to read it, sailed by it, lived by it, trusted their lives to their reading of it. The clouds above the boat tonight are the same clouds, carrying the same information, readable by the same careful eye. The night watch begins at midnight with the handover on deck and ends at 3 with the handover back, and in between it belongs entirely to the person sitting in the cockpit. There is no one awake who needs anything from you. The watch below is asleep, genuinely asleep, the deep motion-assisted sleep of a body that has earned its rest. The boat is sailing itself under the autopilot, the helm held by a hydraulic cylinder responding to the compass signal, the course maintained within a degree or two without human input. Your role is to be present and attentive, to watch the horizon for lights, to check the sail trim every few minutes, to monitor the weather and the AIS display and the feel of the boat in the water, and to be available to respond if something changes. Mostly, nothing changes. The stars come out between clouds, or are always there if the night is clear. And at sea, 30 or 50 or 100 miles from the nearest shore, the stars are vivid in a way that coastal and urban observing cannot replicate. The Milky Way is a structure, a feature, a path across the sky. Not the faint smear it is from a lit coastline, but a dense, textured band of light that casts a faint shadow in the cleanest conditions and tells you, if you know the sky, almost everything about where you are and what time it is. The bow wave is the other light source. In tropical and subtropical waters, in the warmer months, the water is full of bioluminescent organisms, the same dinoflagellates and other microorganisms that produce the glowing blooms visible from satellites, here producing their individual lights in response to the physical disturbance of the bow pushing through the water. The bow wave of a sailing yacht at night in these conditions glows, a cold blue-green fire that runs along both sides of the hull, from the bow back to the stern, the turbulence in the water triggering the bioluminescent flash of millions of tiny organisms simultaneously. The wake behind the boat glows too, a pale blue-green trail that stretches back for tens of meters into the dark water, the churning of the propeller aperture producing its own steady bioluminescent cloud, are dolphins appearing at the bow at night in bioluminescent water, are one of the things that people who have offshore sailing experience describe as genuinely affecting. The animals' bodies, traced in blue-green light as they ride the bow wave, their movements leaving trails through the glowing water, the whole scene playing out in silence in the dark, without any light source except the organisms the dolphin's passage disturbs. The dolphin is there and then not there, a shape made of light in dark water, and then just the water. The 3 hours of the midnight watch pass in this way. The sky and the water and the boat and the compass and the horizon and the occasional adjustment and the warmth of the coffee in the thermos and the gradual cooling of the night air before the pre-dawn chill. The mind, after the first 30 minutes of alertness, settles into a particular state that regular night watch keepers describe as unlike any other waking mental state. Present, calm, uncluttered. The thoughts that normally crowd the day quieted by the simplicity of the task and the scale of the surrounding dark. At 10 minutes to 3, you go below to wake the next watch. You try not to feel too much that you are leaving this, the cockpit, the stars, the bioluminescent wake, the cleanest 3 hours in the world. Step barefoot onto the teak deck of a sailing yacht in the early morning, and the first thing you notice is the warmth, not the air temperature. The morning air over the water is cool, often the coolest part of the day. The warmth is in the wood itself, or rather, in the way the wood receives your foot, the slight give of the corked seams between the planks, the fine texture of the grain surface against the sole, the particular quality of teak that makes it neither cold like metal nor soft like carpet, but something specific to itself. Teak in the morning, before the sun has had time to heat it, and before the dew has quite dried, has a temperature and a texture that is unlike any other surface available to a bare foot on a boat. Teak has been the wood of choice for yacht decks for well over a century, and the reasons are almost entirely practical. It is extraordinarily durable in the marine environment, resistant to rot, resistant to the UV degradation that destroys most other wood species, resistant to the repeated wetting and drying that would split and warp softer timbers. Its natural oil content means it does not require painting or varnishing to maintain its integrity. The oil protects the wood from within, slowly depleting over the years as the wood weathers, but doing so gradually enough that teak decks laid on yachts built 40 years ago are still serviceable today. It is naturally non-slip. The grain texture of weathered teak provides grip that bare feet and deck shoes can rely on in wet conditions. The smell of teak deserves its own acknowledgement. Teak has a specific scent, a warm, slightly oily, resinous smell that is released by moisture and by heat, and that, on a yacht that has been in use for years, so combines with the salt of the sea air and the traces of sunscreen and rope and engine oil and cooking smells that accumulate in any lived-in vessel into a composite smell that people who have spent time on boats describe as immediately and completely evocative. The smell of a teak deck on a warm morning after an anchorage night is the smell of being on a boat, distilled to its most fundamental form. It arrives before anything is said or done, and tells the body exactly where it is. New teak is a warm honey brown, the colour of wood with its natural oils still at the surface, fresh from the shipyard or the refit. Weathered teak is silver grey, the surface oils oxidised away by sun and salt and sea air. The underlying wood bleached to the colour of driftwood, and smooth and soft, and carrying the record of its years in the slight irregularity of its surface. There is a preference among experienced sailors for weathered teak over new. The silver grey is earned. It means the boat has been out in it. The caulking between the teak planks is black, a flexible compound, traditionally oakum bedded in pitch, now more commonly a polysulfide or polyurethane sealant, applied to fill the seams between the planks and seal the deck against water ingress. The black seam lines on a teak deck are as much a part of its visual character as the grain of the wood, running in parallel lines from the bow to the stern, narrowing with the taper of the planks, curving to follow the shape of the deck at the bow and the stern. The deck underfoot is the boat's relationship with the outside world. The hull is below the water. The cabin is enclosed, but the deck is where the body stands between sky and sea, where the sail is trimmed and the anchor is weighed and the watch is kept. It has held many feet. It will hold many more. And this morning, still cool from the night, carrying the particular warmth of teak in the early light, it holds yours. The sailing vessel is somewhere between 7,000 and 10,000 years old. The oldest known sail-driven watercraft appear in ancient Egyptian depictions from around 3,500 BCE. Reed boats on the Nile with a single square sail, the wind pushing them south against the current, so they could float north with it on the return. Slightly older evidence of seafaring from the Aegean and from early Austronesian cultures suggests that sail-assisted ocean travel was already underway by 5000 BCE, that the technology of using the wind to move a vessel on the water is one of the oldest mechanical technologies in human history. Older than the wheel by most accounts, older than writing, developed independently in multiple places, by people whose necessity was transport across water, too wide and too deep to paddle efficiently. For most of this history, the dominant sail configuration was the square sail, a roughly rectangular panel of cloth suspended from a horizontal yard, running perpendicular to the boat's centerline, effective at catching a wind coming from behind, but limited in its ability to sail toward the wind. The square-rigged ships of the age of exploration, the caravels and naus of Columbus and da Gama, the galleons of the Spanish Armada, the great East Indiamen of the Dutch and English trading empires, were carrying the accumulated knowledge of millennia of square sail development. They could cross oceans. They could not sail close to the wind. The fore and aft rig, sails oriented along the boat's centerline rather than across it, changed what sailing could achieve. The lateen sail of the Arabian dhow and the Mediterranean felucca, the lug sail of working boats across northern Europe, the Bermuda or Marconi rig that now dominates offshore sailing. All are fore and aft configurations that allow a vessel to sail at a much closer angle to the wind than the square rig permits. The fore and aft rig made it possible to beat to windward, to make progress toward a destination that was upwind by sailing at an angle to the wind on alternating tacks, as a capability the square riggers lacked. Modern racing yachts have pushed the technology to places the early sailors could not have imagined. The foiling yachts of the America's Cup, carbon fiber hulls lifted entirely out of the water on hydrofoil appendages, sailing at speeds 3 times the wind speed, are the current extreme of a development arc that began with a reed boat on the Nile. The physics connecting these 2 points is continuous. The same aerodynamic principles that drive the reed boat's square sail drive the carbon wing of the foiling yacht, refined by 10,000 years of accumulated learning, but fundamentally unchanged in its relationship with the wind. The cruising yacht in the anchorage tonight is somewhere in the middle of this arc. It is faster and more weatherly than anything that existed before the 20th century, and simpler and slower and more livable than the racing machines at the extreme end of the current technology. It is a practical expression of what sailing has learned about the balance between performance and comfort, between the demands of the sea and the needs of the people aboard. It carries the full inheritance of 10,000 years of sailors working out what the wind will do, and how to make the water carry you anyway. A yacht at sea speaks in a vocabulary of sounds that takes time to learn and a lifetime to fully read. The bow wave is the most continuous. It begins the moment the boat moves through still water and continues for as long as there is forward motion. A low, rushing sound that rises in pitch and volume with boat speed, of the water being pushed aside by the bow and folding back along the topsides in 2 white lines of disturbed water. At 6 knots in a light chop, the bow wave is a gentle hiss. At 8 knots in a fresh breeze, it is a deeper rush, the sound filling the forward cabin. At hull speed, the theoretical maximum speed of a displacement hull, determined by waterline length, typically between 7 and 9 knots for a cruising yacht, the bow wave becomes something you feel as much as hear. A low-frequency vibration in the hull structure, transmitted upward through the keel and the frames into every surface below decks. The rigging speaks with the wind. A yacht under sail in a moderate breeze has a standing rigging note, a particular frequency hum produced by the shrouds and stays vibrating in the airflow. You are specific to the tension they are set up at and the diameter of the wire. This note is constant when the wind is steady and shifts in pitch when the wind strengthens or lightens, providing a continuous unconscious update on the wind's behavior. Experienced sailors hear a change in the rigging note and register it before consciously processing it, the body responding to the information faster than thought. The boom is its own sound source. When the sail is well trimmed and the wind is steady, the boom is silent, the sail above it full and drawing, the main sheet tension holding everything in place. When the wind shifts and the sail is momentarily under-trimmed, the leech flutters, a soft, rhythmic flutter at the trailing edge of the main, barely audible but felt by the alert helmsman as a signal to adjust. When the boat rounds up into the wind and the sail depowers, the whole main shakes, a loud, insistent flag-like flogging that no sailor can ignore, demanding the helm bear away and fill the sail again. Below decks, the sounds are different in character. The water sound against the hull is the most constant, the complex resonating of each wave against the fiberglass, transmitted through the hull structure. Underneath it, in a stronger breeze with the boat heeled, a deeper sound, the groan of the hull under load, the slight flex of the fiberglass as the keel's bending moment works its way through the structure. The sound of a boat doing what it was built to do, but reminding you that it is doing it. And the sound the anchor chain makes as the boat swings is distinct from all sailing sounds. A periodic clank or rumble as the chain shifts on the bow roller or on the seabed, occasional, irregular, the sound of an object that has been settled and is being gently disturbed. It is one of the anchor sounds that wakes a light sleeping sailor in the night. Not because it is alarming, but because it arrives unexpectedly against the background of the water sounds and registers as different. Experienced sailors sleep through all of these sounds because they have learned to classify them as baseline, the normal sounds of the boat in normal conditions. What wakes them is the absence of a sound that should be there, or the presence of a sound that should not be. The sudden silence of the bow wave. The boat has stopped. The new or irregular banging from forward. The anchor chain has wrapped something. The sound of the engine starting that was not expected. The boat's sounds are its language, and the sailor who knows the boat knows exactly what it is saying. Even asleep, even at 3 in the morning, even before the eyes open. Below decks, the saloon is the heart of the boat. Come down the companionway, the steep ladder-like steps below the hatch, and the world changes register in a way that is specific to the interior of a sailing yacht, and unlike the interior of any other vessel or any structure on land. The ceiling is low. Standing headroom in a 35-foot yacht is typically between 1.80 meter and 1.90 meter, and in many older boats, less than that. The space is narrow. The beam of the boat determines the maximum width of the saloon, and the furniture must fit within this constraint. The light during the day comes through the deck hatches and the port lights, the small oval windows in the cabin sides, in the particular slightly angled quality of light that enters a below-deck space through openings positioned for ventilation rather than for illumination. At night, the saloon is lit by LEDs, usually warm white, usually dimmable, usually controlled from a panel at the chart table, that also manages the running lights, the navigation instruments, and the bilge pump. The amber white of the saloon lights at night, seen from the cockpit looking down the companionway, is one of the most recognizable and comforting sights in sailing. The warm glow from below indicating that the boat is inhabited and warm, that something is cooking, or someone is reading, or the watch below is asleep in the lee berths. The lee berths are the sleeping accommodation on passage, the settees on each side of the saloon that can be made up as sea berths, with a lee cloth on the high side to prevent the sleeping person from rolling out when the boat heels. The lee cloth is a strip of heavy canvas or sailcloth lashed to the settee edge and raised when the berth is in use, forming a wall of fabric against which the sleeping sailor can brace. It is not comfortable in any conventional sense. You are enclosed on one side by the lee cloth and on the other by the hull, in a berth that is perhaps 60 centimeters wide, with the boat heeled 15 degrees, and the sounds of the sea in the fiberglass just centimeters from your head. It is also, consistently, she the best sleep sailors ever have. The books on the fiddle-railed shelf opposite do not move when the boat heels. The fiddle rail, a low wooden edge along the shelf, holds them in place the way it holds everything that must not slide. The books on a passage maker's yacht are the books that matter, not decorative, not aspirational, but the ones that have been read and will be read again on the passages ahead. Pilot books for the coasts the yacht is sailing narratives from people who have made the same passages, a novel or two, the Admiralty tide tables for the next season's cruising ground. The chart table is the boat's office, the navigation station where the charts are spread, and the instruments are read, and the position is plotted, and the weather is checked, and the logbook is maintained. In older yachts, paper charts. In modern ones, a chart plotter with electronic charts and GPS, the boat's position marked on the screen at all times. But the logbook is still paper, still written in pencil, because pencil does not run when it gets wet, still recording the position and the wind and the barometric pressure and the sail configuration and the events of the watch in the compact, precise language that offshore sailors have always used to document their passage. The boat contains a complete world. Everything needed for the next month is here, below this deck, within arm's reach of the saloon table. The sea is outside, and the saloon holds, small and warm and amber-lit, against all of it. The fog arrives without announcement. One watch it is clear, the horizon sharp, the headlands visible, the other anchored boats distinct shapes in the bay. The next watch, the visibility has dropped to 100 meters, then 50. Then the world has compressed to the immediate boat and a circle of dark grey water and nothing beyond it. The fog is not dramatic. It does not arrive with sound or force. It simply reduces the visible world to its nearest edges and holds it there, quietly, for as long as it decides to stay. Fog at sea is disorienting in the specific way that any dramatic reduction of sensory information is disorienting. The eye, which in normal conditions is receiving a continuous stream of spatial reference data from the horizon and the land and the other vessels, is suddenly receiving almost nothing. The compass still works. The GPS still works. The depth sounder still works. But the eye, the sense organ the brain trusts most completely for its picture of the immediate environment, is delivering a uniform grey that contains no information about what is ahead or around the boat. The fog amplifies sound. This is a well-documented acoustic effect of high humidity air and has nothing to do with the subjective sensitivity of the listener. Fog genuinely changes the acoustic properties of the air, reducing the absorption of sound energy in certain frequency ranges, and altering the way sound propagates from a point source across the water surface. Sounds that would be inaudible in clear air carry further in fog. Another vessel's engine, a foghorn on a headland, the bell buoy marking the entrance to a harbour. So these sounds arrive out of the grey without warning, and from a direction that is difficult to localise, because the usual visual cross-referencing that the brain uses to pinpoint a sound source is absent. The yacht moves through fog with a specific deliberateness that other sea conditions do not require. Speed is reduced. A boat that cannot see what is ahead should not be moving faster than it can stop. The radar, if the yacht has one, becomes the primary navigation instrument. The screen painting returns from other vessels and from the land. The positions updated every rotation of the antenna. The helmsman watching for any target that is on a converging course. The foghorn sounds at the required intervals, one long blast every 2 minutes for a sailing vessel underway. Its sound absorbed immediately by the fog and carrying, by the acoustic properties just described, further than its apparent volume would suggest. In an anchorage, fog has a different quality. The anchor is down and the boat is not moving, and the fog's compression of the world is not threatening but enclosing. The sounds of the other anchored vessels carry across the grey water. The occasional creak of a hull, the soft clank of a halyard, the murmur of a voice from a boat that is invisible. The foghorn on the headland sounds every 30 seconds, its tone carrying into the bay in a long, deep note that arrives clearly and fades slowly. There is a specific intimacy to the fog-enclosed anchorage. The world has contracted to the length of the boat and the short radius of grey water around it. And within this contracted world, everything is very present. The hull, the rigging, and the splash of a fish below the bow. The smell of the salt air heavy with moisture. The things that are immediately here are very here. Everything beyond the grey is absent, unreachable, temporarily irrelevant. The fog holds the bay holds the boat holds the sleeping crew, and outside, in the grey, the foghorn sounds its long, slow note into the morning, marking the headland, keeping its watch. On a boat, a rope is never called a rope. It is a line. This distinction is not pedantry or affectation. It is a practical vocabulary decision made by the sailing tradition and preserved because it works. A rope is a generic object. A line is a specific functional element of the sailing system, named for its function, called by that name, so that when someone shouts, "Ease the main sheet" in a rising gust, there is no ambiguity about which line, among the dozen or more controlling the sails and the boom and the spinnaker pole and the anchor, is meant. The main sheet controls the angle of the boom and the mainsail relative to the boat's centerline, the primary trim adjustment for the mainsail. The jib sheets, there are two, one on each side, control the trim of the headsail, the working sheet on the leeward side, and the lazy sheet on the windward side, ready to become the working sheet when the boat tacks. The halyards raise the sails. The main halyard, the jib halyard, the spinnaker halyard if there is a spinnaker. The topping lift holds the boom up when the sail is lowered. The boom vang controls the downward tension on the boom, preventing it from rising and the sail from twisting in a breeze. The Cunningham controls the vertical tension on the leading edge of the mainsail, adjusting the position of maximum draft. The outhaul controls the horizontal tension along the foot of the mainsail, flattening or deepening the sail's lower section. Each of these names is ancient. The halyard, from the Old English heave and yard to heave the yard, has been in use since the first square-rigged ships raised their yards to the mastheads. The sheet, from the Old Norse scout, the corner of a sail, appears in sailing literature from the medieval period. The shrouds, the stays, the forestay, the backstay, the standing rigging names are equally old, equally specific, equally unchanged in their essential meaning from the age of wooden ships. And sailors who crewed square riggers in the 18th century would recognize every functional element of the modern sailing yacht's rig by the name it is still called, even though the materials are now stainless steel wire and high modulus synthetic fibre rather than hemp and manila. The lines run through blocks, the nautical name for pulleys, and clutches and cleats and winches. The winch is the mechanical advantage device that allows a single person to trim a heavily loaded sail. The sheet is led to the winch drum, several turns taken, and the handle turned, the gearing of the winch multiplying the input force, enough to trim the sail against the full force of the wind. Modern winches are self-tailing. They grip the line automatically and hold it without the crew member needing to tail the line manually while winching. And the feel of a line under load is one of the physical pleasures of sailing. A jib sheet loaded up in a good breeze. The line hard as a rod, humming slightly with the vibration transmitted from the sail through the cloth, and the clew patch and the sheet, the surface of the braided cover pressed tight by the load, tells you more about what the sail is doing than any instrument. The load in a halyard when a sail is close to full, the way a sheet softens when a sail is over-trimmed and the flow begins to separate. The lines are data, readable by touch, in the dark as well as the light. They have the same names they always had. They do the same jobs they always did. The hands that learn them are the newest thing about them. By the third day at sea, the land is completely gone. Not just out of sight. The land has been out of sight since the first evening, when the last headland sank below the horizon and the sea closed around the boat in every direction. What is gone by the third day is the land's presence in the mind, the appointments and the tasks and the unfinished conversations and the ambient awareness of where things are on shore. All of this has been replaced, gradually and without drama, by the world of the boat and the sea and the sky. Passage making does this to a person. Not immediately. The first day offshore is still partly occupied by the departure, the landfall check, the adjustment to the watch schedule, the management of the sea legs that most people need a day or two to find their balance for. The second day is transition. The third day, the routines are established. The body is adjusted. The mind has accepted that this, the boat, the horizon, the watch cycle, the weather, the position plotting, the meals at their appointed times, is the complete world for the duration of the passage. People who have made long offshore passages describe what happens to perception after several days at sea. The horizon, which initially registered as a boundary, the edge of the visible world beyond which lay things that were out of sight, becomes simply the shape of the world. The circle of sea extending to the horizon in every direction stops feeling like confinement and starts feeling like the appropriate scale of things. The boat in the middle of this circle is neither small nor isolated. It is exactly where it is, moving through a world that is exactly the right size. So the rhythms of the watch system impose a structure on time that most land-based schedules cannot replicate. Sleep, watch, eat, sleep, watch, eat. The cycle repeats with the reliable regularity of a biological process, the body adjusting to it within a day or two, and then finding it not merely tolerable, but genuinely restorative. The 3 hours of sleep are enough because they are all that is available, and the body knows this and uses them completely. The 4 hours on watch are enough because the watch is all there is, and it fills itself completely with the immediate reality of the boat and the sea. The sunsets on passage are different from sunsets on land. There is no land in the way, no haze from roads and cities, no gradual attenuation of the view by intervening terrain. The sun goes into the sea, directly, completely, at the full disk touching the water and then being swallowed by it. The last sliver disappearing in a moment that the whole crew stops to watch, because the moment is simple and complete and costs nothing. Sometimes, rarely but really, a green flash. The optical phenomenon produced by the refraction of the sun's light through the dense atmosphere at the horizon, visible for a fraction of a second, just as the last edge of the sun disappears. A brief, intense, emerald pulse at the horizon that sailors have described and documented for centuries, and that many experienced sailors have never seen, and others have seen dozens of times. By day 5, the boat is the world, not in a closed or claustrophobic sense, in the sense that the world is entirely present, and the sky and the water and the wind and the boat and the 2 people taking turns to sail it and sleep and cook and navigate. This is not a reduced version of the world. It is a complete one, scaled to what matters. The land will come back. It always does. But for these days, between one shore and another, there is only this, and it is, almost universally, described as enough. Before GPS, the ocean had no grid. There were no coordinates visible in the water, no position marker on the sea surface, no way for a sailor to look at the ocean and determine where in it they were. Position had to be inferred, calculated from the observed angle of the sun or the stars above the known horizon, from the time elapsed since the last confirmed position, from the measured speed and the steered course and the estimated effects of wind and current. So the art of navigating across open water without sight of land is called celestial navigation, and it is one of the most elegant practical applications of geometry and astronomy that human beings have ever developed. The instrument at its center is the sextant, a handheld optical device, roughly triangular in form, whose name comes from the 60-degree arc of its calibrated limb. The sextant measures the angle between 2 objects, typically the sun or a star and the horizon, with a precision of better than 1 arc minute when used correctly. This angle, combined with the precise time at which it was measured, and a set of published astronomical tables giving the predicted position of the celestial body at any moment, and allows the navigator to calculate a line of position, a line on the Earth's surface along which the vessel must be located at that moment. A single sight gives a line. 2 sights, crossed, give a position fix. At noon, when the sun reaches its highest point above the horizon, local apparent noon, a single sight gives the vessel's latitude directly, without the need for the time. The noon sight has been the sailor's daily position check for as long as sextants have existed, and continues to be practiced by offshore sailors today, partly as a navigational backup to GPS and partly as a connection to the tradition. The stars used in celestial navigation are not arbitrary, and they are a specific set, the navigational stars, whose positions are tabulated in the nautical almanac, and whose brightness and their distribution across the sky ensures that several of them are always visible from any position on Earth on any clear night. Polaris, the pole star, sits within 1 degree of the celestial North Pole and gives latitude in the northern hemisphere directly from its observed altitude above the horizon. The Southern Cross and its pointer stars perform the equivalent function for navigators in the southern hemisphere, where Polaris is below the horizon. The planets complicate the picture slightly. Their positions change against the star field from night to night, which is why they were historically called wanderers from the Greek planets. But their predicted positions are tabulated in the almanac, and they serve as navigational bodies alongside the stars. Venus, Jupiter, and Mars are typically the brightest objects in the night sky after the moon, and are easily identified and used for sights. Learning to use a sextant is not quick. The technique of bringing the image of the star down to the horizon through the sextant's mirrors, of rocking the instrument to find the true vertical, of reading the angle from the micrometer drum while maintaining the star on the horizon. All of this requires practice before it becomes fluent. The subsequent calculation, worked through the tables or the digital almanac, takes several minutes for an experienced navigator. But the result, a position on the ocean derived from the geometry of the Earth and the stars, with no dependence on any electronic system, carries a particular satisfaction that GPS, for all its convenience, does not provide. The stars above the yacht tonight are the same stars that navigated the Polynesian canoes across the Pacific, and the Arab dhows across the Indian Ocean, and the Portuguese caravels around Cape Horn. They are still doing their work, still available to anyone who knows how to ask them where they are. The sextant is in its box below the chart table, ready, as it always has been, for the sky to be clear and the horizon to be sharp. The headland appears at dawn on the 7th day, not as a dramatic emergence, not a sudden revelation from fog or darkness, just the gradual solidifying of a darker shape against the pale grey of the pre-dawn sky to the southwest, distinguishable from cloud by its stillness. By the way, it does not move as the cloud above it moves, by the faint vertical precision of its edge against the horizon. Land, the end of the passage, the thing that has been out there, in the direction of the compass course, through 6 days and nights of ocean. The mood on board changes when land appears, not to celebration. Passage sailors are not dramatic about landfall. Something quieter, a collective easing, a relaxation of the sustained background attention that offshore sailing requires, even when nothing is demanding active response. The sea has been managed for 6 days. The position has been confirmed every 4 hours. The weather has been watched. The boat has been sailed and fed and rested in. All of that continues to be true, so it continues to require attention for the hours of the approach, and the entry into the harbour, and the finding of the anchorage. But the land is there, visible, confirming that the navigation was correct, and the destination is real. The approach takes most of the day. The headland grows slowly from a dark smudge to a defined shape. The cliffs visible, then the colour of the vegetation on the clifftop, then the white of a lighthouse structure. By mid-afternoon, the harbour entrance is visible, the leading marks for the approach lined up. The pilot book, open at the chart table, describing the depths and the hazards and the preferred anchorage. The engine goes on in the entrance channel. The wind in a harbour entrance is typically unreliable, fluking off the surrounding land, and the discipline of motoring in narrow water under control is better than the uncertainty of trying to sail. The sails come down, the mainsail first, then the jib, both furled and secured, the boat transforming from a sailing vessel to a motor vessel for the last few hundred meters of its passage. The anchorage is behind the inner breakwater, sheltered from the swell that has been running throughout the passage. A dozen other yachts are already anchored there, some in for the night, some that have been here for days. The approach, the depth sounder reading, the selection of the spot, the briefing of the foredeck crew, the approach into the wind, the release of the anchor and the counting of the scope. All of this is performed with the slightly automatic competence of people who have done it many times, and who are, more at the end of a 6-day passage, moving on the momentum of routine rather than the freshness of full attention. Then, the engine off. The chain straightens as the boat drifts back and takes up on the anchor. A brief reverse to set it. The engine off again. The silence that follows the engine stopping is the sound of a rifle. The boat swings. The water is calm behind the breakwater. The sound of the other yachts carries across the water. The occasional voice, the clink of a halyard, the specific domestic sounds of a cruising anchorage settling into its evening. The sky to the west is orange, and the land around the bay is dark, and the first lights are coming on in the village above the harbour. The passage is done. The anchor holds. The boat rocks very gently in the protected water, and below, in the sea berths that have been occupied and vacated and occupied again through 6 days of ocean, the exhausted and satisfied bodies of the crew are already, within minutes of the engine stopping, completely asleep. The water laps against the hull, as it has always lapped, as it will always lap, all through the long, dark, still, anchored night. The boat is moving, but only just. This is where we began, and this is where we return. Because the yacht story is a circular one, like all sea stories, ending where it started, the departure port becoming the arrival port on the return passage, the anchorage in the sheltered bay, the place the boat always finds its way back to, the slow roll, the dark water, the chain curving down to the sand below, none the sound of the hull in conversation with the water that has been pressing against it and releasing and pressing again since the moment the boat was first put in the sea. You know this boat now. You know the keel hanging silent and heavy below the waterline, converting the wind's sideways force into forward motion, keeping the mast pointed at the sky through every sea and every gust. You know the sail working in near silence when it is properly trimmed, the pressure differential across its surface, the same physics as a wing, the boat drawn forward through the water by a force it cannot see. You know the galley and the gimbaled stove, and the soup that arrives in a bowl after the midnight watch, and tastes like the best thing ever made. You know the watch system and the 3-hour sleep that is deeper than any 7 hours at home, and the handover in the dark cockpit, and the particular completeness of the midnight watch alone under the stars with the bioluminescent bow wave lit blue-green in the black water below. You know the anchor going down with the heavy clatter of chain, and the set confirmed, and the engine off, and the particular piece of a boat well held in good ground in a sheltered bay. You know the teak deck warm underfoot in the morning, and the fog arriving without announcement, and the saloon amber lit below decks, with the books in their fiddle rails, and the chart on the table, and the logbook open to today's page. You know the sextant in its box below the chart table, and the stars it was made to measure. The same stars that navigated the Polynesian wayfinders and the Arab dhow captains and the Portuguese pilots through 10,000 years of ocean crossing. The sea has been teaching people how to rest since people first put boats on it. Not rest in the sense of passivity. The boat requires attention. The watch requires presence. The weather requires reading. But rest in the sense of everything simplified to what is immediately real. The boat, the water, the wind, the horizon, the watch below, sleeping, the watch above, present. Nothing else available, nothing else required. This is not a reduced version of life. It is a clarified one. The ocean strips away everything that does not matter at sea, and what remains, the boat, the crew, the passage, the arrival, turns out to be enough, more than enough. Before you go, one small thing that keeps this channel going. Hit the like button. It takes a moment and means everything. Subscribe if you haven't yet, because tomorrow night we will be here again with another story built for exactly this hour. Your berth will be ready. The lee cloth is rigged. The watch on deck has it handled. But for now, the anchor is down, and the chain is straight, and the boat is swinging gently in the dark bay, and the water is making the sound it makes against the hull at rest. That soft, irregular, never quite repeating sound. The oldest sleep sound in the world. Still working. Sleep well.